Welcome to Zelda's Peaches and Biscuits podcast. I'm Alaina Doughton, the director of the Scott and Zelda Fitzgerald Museum, and I'm joined by
Maura Martello. I am a Zelda researcher, and I'm a docent here at the museum.
And today we're going to discuss Zelda's primary school, the Sayre Street School. And we think we found some interesting things about it, but to give an idea of, I guess, her educational foundations. Mm-hmm. First, the school was on the site when we went and saw it before the shutdown, and you'll see the photos on our page. And it's kind of a Romanesque brick building. We found out that it was done by an architect who then later does the Dexter Methodist Church, not the Dexter Avenue Church, but the original building was built in 1891.
Yeah, J.W. Worthington was the...
Yeah.
I love that name.
And so he did...
architect.
Yeah, he did, and the Methodist Church is still there. It's kind of across catty corner from the Dexter Avenue, and it is an impressive brick building. He does this school first and then it. However, it was the original site for the Chilton College, which we thought that it was only a women's college, and it's where Zelda's mother came to Montgomery, was to attend Mrs. Chilton's college.
Female Academy, I think it was called.
And then we, in the newspaper clipping, saw in 1910, which would have been when Zelda was a student at the Sayre Street School. Just to back up a little, the Sayre Street School in Montgomery is on the corner of Sayre Street and Mildred, which is just a block away from the Equal Justice Memorial. So if you, we've had a few people email and ask where are these houses, and the Pleasant Avenue abuts the middle of the Equal Justice Memorial, I think on the south side. So if you're looking, Pleasant Avenue's there. If you go up Mildred, this school is on the corner. You cannot go in it, but you can walk around it.
And you really can't miss it. It does look like a school. It's very beautiful. It's a red brick school, but it has bands of intersecting bricks that are a different color, maybe a more tawny color. It's very beautiful.
Yeah,
you can peek through the doors.
Yeah, you
we
can.
Have nice photos.
And we do have photos, and this we'll post some of these newspaper articles, but it was a Richardsonian Romanesque style. That I'm not quite sure what a Richardsonian Romanesque style is. But we know while Zelda was a student there, Mrs. Chilton was, I guess, commemorated, and it's still there today. There's a piece of white marble. If you're facing the school, it's on the bottom right.
Right.
And in our scholarship, this was not the building that her mother attended.
No.
War her mother was present, and in 1910, they did commemorate Ms. Chilton, and I didn't know her story, but I guess she was a Civil War widow who had been bankrupted. I guess her husband had moved all their money into...
This is Mrs. Chilton.
This is Mrs. Chilton. But I think it's interesting that basically as a widow, her estate's gone, she opens a school for women, and then it grows so substantially that the city bought her school. It started, I guess, in her house, went to a larger house. Then the city bought her college, and that's where the Sayre Street School is. But again, the thing that I really miss in all the biographies is that, yet again, you have this very enterprising woman who thinks that women's education is very important. So it's just one more person I think we can add that had a positive influence on Zelda.
Exactly.
That there are these extraordinarily innovative, intelligent, entrepreneurial,
She's surrounded.
Yeah, surrounded by them. And then the other thing that I found surprising, and we will post this, there is a kind of dark image. In the paper, they list that Dr. Thomas Owen had been fortunate enough to secure an old photograph, and then he list who had attended, and the first person in the list is Mrs. A.D. Sayre.
Which is Minnie
Machen
Sayre,
Sayre, Zelda's mother. And then you read the rest of the list, and it's still a who's who of Montgomery names.
Is there any way to see Minnie in the photo?
We will put it. We'll put it on our show notes. So go to our website. We'll of course post all these. You can see it's a little dark. The other thing is that the college went from being a female college to apparently being co-ed, because as you read the list, male names are then added, and one of those names is Minnie's brother-in-law, Reed Sayre, which was Zelda's uncle. We know lived with them for a time.
It would be wonderful to really see a good reproduction of this photo, because it's obviously, it looks like as if it was taken, several years after the Civil War, from the clothing of the women.
Yeah. And we know this is how and why Zelda's mother was in Montgomery, was to attend this school. So moving on to the actual, when Zelda was at school, in the biographies, they talk about how she goes to school. She comes back after her first day and is like, no, I'm not doing this. And then her family goes, okay, you don't have to go to school. And she doesn't go to school to the next year. And I was really curious, what was going on?
Now, according to Save Me the Waltz, she says to her mother after the first day of school that she seems to know everything. Yeah. And it's really not worth going.
Well, so...
Well, who knows what they were... Maybe it was flashcards.
Well, also the one thing, when they established and built the school, it was a very modern school in 1891. And we did find, you'll probably hear me rustling, a newspaper clipping talking about how it had all the modern amenities, that it had heating, so a heating system, that it had great ventilation. And then by 1906, which is not that far away, if you that it has some of the worst conditions.
Decrepit now.
So you just think from the late 1880s to it's a massive technological shift. Like we've already mentioned, people are getting electric lights, they're getting early air conditioning, early refrigerators. So this school was built at the very end of low technology, apparently. So in 1906, they are talking about that they need to either renovate the school or it has the worst conditions. And it says, perhaps the poorest conditions to be found in the city are those at the Sayre Street School. The building is old and built along lines not in accordance with the principles recognized in modern school structure. There is no system for ventilation, the teachers being compelled in order to get fresh air to open the windows. During cold winter weather, the open window works like a hardship upon teachers and the pupils alike. And it says on cold days, it was stated the thermometer is frequently below 65 degrees. Mm-hmm. And then it goes on in the story where 70 degrees is ideal, and parts of the building on the north side, it drops to 60 degrees.
And for people who don't know, it does get cold in the winter in Montgomery, Alabama.
Yeah.
Alabama it goes down into the 20s quite often.
Yeah. We don't have so much snow as we have ice storms, which is not fun, because snow would be much better than an ice storm.
Yeah. Luckily, I haven't yet experienced ice storms.
Well, basically, it just freezes, and the problem is like limbs and black ice. And then it says, in addition to their lack of proper ventilation, the teachers of the building are further handicapped by the defective heating system. It had a steam heat system, which in 1891.
Can that blow up like a steamship?
Yeah, but it would have happened in the basement.
Yeah.
And they talk about how it's like the bricks in the basement are so hot because the steam is not working correctly. The other thing that I found really telling is that they're talking about how many students are in a single room. And we won't read this, but it's still that way today, that when you go, they had 4 classrooms on the ground floor, apparently 4 more upstairs, and then a classroom or some in the basement, which we didn't see in the basement. But and it has this large central hallway. And that we read this story in 1994 when the house was up for, I guess, sale or lease. And we know that there seemed to have been a florist there. It's currently empty. But even this story says that the ground plan had not been, the ground plan was effectively the same and,
Yes.
and it matches to what we see. So in the end of this article, it talks about how many students are in each class. Each class has its own room. And so Zelda would have been, what, first grade, maybe second in 1906? So it says second grade.
First grade.
So second grade had 51 students and first grade had 49 students in one room. And I can't.
Big families in those days.
Well, you just think, what are classes capped at today? 25, 24, 25? If you have 30, it's just insane. But you think some of these classes, they're all in the high 40s, low 50 students stuck in one room with one teacher.
Yeah.
What a nightmare. So
this is why teachers were cranky.
Oh, absolutely. Or they had to be. It says, besides filling almost every desk and seat in the building, in one of the rooms of fifth grade, the number of pupils exceeded the number of desks and seats, and 3 of the children being obliged to do their work at a table placed at one side of the room. And I wasn't able to find what curriculum they had, but I think Mayfield, talking about their high school, that she had a very traditional curriculum, English, science, math. We don't know we'll try to find out what they were teaching, but the reason that Zelda's
we know
going
a little bit more when, at Sidney Lanier when
Yes.
she goes to high school. We have a much clearer picture of her high school courses,
but at that time, we know that she and her siblings went to public school because her father was on the school board, and that politically it wouldn't do for him to send his children to private schools. And we'll talk briefly about the Margaret Booth School. The Margaret Booth School eventually, I think 1913, it's in the house, and that house is still there. It's across from
the Sayre Street
Sayre Street School. So I can't. So what would a young, bored Zelda Sayre, in a class of however many people, is she the class clown? Is she the prankster? We know that her siblings were extremely good students, valedictorian, but Zelda not so much.
Yeah. And I guess if we were to go back to, I think it's her book, Surrey of the Eagle's Nest, she's writing to friends in the book.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if she's passing the book back and forth, at school the way we used to do. At least I used to do. We used to write notes to each other and, pass them around. I think she had a lot of joie de vivre.
I just, and this is another question which will come up on.
And she knew everything, as she said.
Yeah. The other thing that I found in 1905, because I think she must have started school in 1905 or 1906, but they also just lived around the corner on Pleasant Ave. So this was her childhood neighborhood. And we have another instance of a major fire. And of course, fire, tragically follows her. But in 1905, it says homes of Dr. Hogan, Mrs. Henry Booth, the Edsons, and R.L. Butt was consumed by a great throng and a great fire. And so they describe how these houses on Sayre Street, and again, 117 Sayre Street is where the Margaret Booth School is. So it's literally across the street from the school. And it says this huge fire broke out at 2 p.m. And then they talk about how the alarm, as soon as the fire had gained its large proportions, a message passed from house to house in the western part of the city that the Sayre Street School house was afire. This rumor caused great excitement. Parents of school children, not stopping to don their street clothes, rushed to the school building in which their loved ones were studying to find no ground for alarm. It says, when the fire bell rang and it was discovered by the teachers of the Sayre Street School, the location of the conflagration, the children were drilled out of the building and stationed on the lawn in front of the schoolhouse. And so here you have this major fire, and we know we're still trying to figure out how and why Zelda thought it was okay to climb on the roof and call the fire department. and just going through the newspaper,
exciting, I guess.
I think so. And there was also it just shows how how maybe common fires were or how terrifying they were.
Absolutely.
So in 1908, there's this.
This is March, I see. So it would have been winter time.
Yeah, it would have been early. March is it's a
Depends,
weird time. Yeah, it could, yeah.
Yeah, it does.
It could either snow or it could be 80 degrees.
It's true.
It's true. In 1908, it says electric light in school basement causes fire alarm. It's called Will-o'-the-Wisp. And it says an electric light in the basement of the Sayre Street School appeared in the role of a will-o'-the-wisp before the fire department at 7:30 o'clock last night. Some passerby noticed a faint glow in the basement of the school and was deluded into the belief that the school was afire. I like how they keep saying a fire as one where A-F-I-R-E instead of on fire. An alarm was sent into the department, but the nature of the illumination was soon discovered and all excitement allayed. The Madison Avenue firemen learned of the alarm was a false one before they reached the scene, and they turned back to the station. The electric light was extinguished without damage. But you have all these, fire causes this great interest.
Yes. In fact, I can remember reading, I've always been obsessed with the 1920s and some of the Algonquin group, and who would have been made up of playwrights and people like Edna Ferber, novelists, many, many extraordinary talents of the early 20th century. They would actually get on a train to follow a fire in Philadelphia. They would rush down to Penn Station because they were, I hate to say it, they were kind of firebugs. Not that they started fires, but they enjoyed watching them. They enjoyed watching the furniture being pushed out the windows. It's very strange. People.
I think it's maybe a human impulse too. I know not in the U.S., but when I lived overseas and I've heard it in different places. In the U.S., I don't think we have this. But they say if you're a woman and you're in trouble, don't yell help, yell fire. Because if you yell help, people are like, oh, I may get hurt. But if you yell fire, people want to see it. Or they think, oh, my house could catch on fire too, so that people will come and help you. And then again, this was overseas. So we have, the don't yell fire in a crowded theater. But
it's the opposite.
Well, it's the opposite, that if you think, that there is this natural inclination to want to see fire, I guess.
I guess so. I only saw one fire in Manhattan in a tenement building, and it was enough for me.
Yeah.
Once is enough.
The other thing that we found out about the school, which I found funny, is every now and then you would have these either school improvement societies or the notes from the like the school board meeting. And one, it says Mrs. Goldwaite, who I'm sure Goldwaite Street was named, again in the neighborhood, who has served as the president of the General School Improvement Association. She was elected, but the thing that she wanted to do away with was these vendors who apparently showed up at recess. It says the question of having the street vendors stop from coming to the schools at recess was their unsanitary and unhealthy wares was discussed, feelingly, almost tearfully. It says the remembrance of the white coat vendor scratching his head with the ice cream scoop between dips into his freezer was neither elegant nor appetizing. It says the memories of fights between two of these merchants at various times in the presence of the delighted boys and the alarmed girls brought groans from some of the teachers present. And then it goes on. I'm not sure of the second paragraph because they're doing different schools. But so that was from the Sayre Street School. And this might be from like the Capitol Heights area. It says, all in all, it was proved that these popcorn, red candy, ice cream wagons are a nuisance and a menace to the health of children. It was decided to ask the new advisory board to present to the city commission a petition that the privilege of selling at the schools be withdrawn from the vendors. It is quite possible that some means of supplying clean, wholesome lunches will be provided by the women who are interested in the school children. You just think we still have this.
Yes.
School lunches, what's in the school lunches, should you have vending machines at schools? But
now, if I recall, it just dawned on me that Zelda once, in the 40s, came upon a blind Confederate soldier who sold her candy as a child.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had been a bugler, I think, in the war. So he must have been one of.
He may have been.
Yeah, I
But
imagine Zelda being at the front of the line somehow during recess, because we do know that she owed money to May's Confectionery downtown.
Yeah. She
She
apparently
had
had
a
a
little
sweet
charge
tooth.
card as a seven-year-old.
Yeah. I guess this was the Decatur Street School, but it's just funny that
Yeah, things never change all that much.
no, but you just think the idea of at recess, you're playing outside and there's these vendors. Today would be the ice cream truck or maybe a food wagon or food truck rather. But that you have kids running around, and this is it has to be a fairly affluent neighborhood because kids have pocket change to buy popcorn, red candy, ice cream. So we don't know much about the curriculum, but
But we do know what she ate at lunchtime.
yes, but they're packed in there. The other thing that was interesting, and you think not a lot has changed, is that all of these teachers are women. And I was surprised the principal at the Sayre Street School was also a woman. However, all of the superintendent of schools and the board are all men. So I wasn't able to determine where her teachers had been educated, but when it said that there was this fire in 1905 at Mrs. Henry Booth, and we know it's across the street, and we know that house becomes the Margaret Booth School.
Right.
And I'm assuming maybe Margaret Booth is the daughter of Mrs. Henry Booth, because the fire happens in 1905, and the newspaper articles say that there was $5,000 in damage, but that her insurance was only $2,500. And that, I wondered, is this why they found the school? Is it like Mrs. Chilton, who's this war widow who's lost her fortune, so she starts a school to support herself? Margaret Booth effectively seems to do the same thing, probably the daughter, but the house becomes the school, and it becomes I always thought of Margaret Booth's school as being a kind of finishing school, not academically rigorous. We know that Sarah Hart went to Margaret Booth, Sarah Mayfield. When the Fitzgeralds are here in Montgomery, they send Scotty to the Margaret Booth School. So I was trying to determine if this is why the school was founded, which there's still that question.
You mean on the heels of a fire?
The fire, they hit a financial down
Yeah.
and then so we got to do something. So they start the school in the house. It seems it's a big gap from 05 to 13. But the thing that really impressed me about the Margaret Booth School is the quality of its teachers.
Yeah, it's a remarkable institution. And it lasts until, I think it's 1954.
Yes.
Upon her death.
So I'll try to read a few, but for example, the one that kind of interested me is it says, there's several, I wanted to get the right one, but basically like the French teacher is from France, studied at the Sorbonne and at Oxford, and comes to Montgomery to teach French. And that almost all of these young women have significant college educations. For example, Spanish teacher had taught at Columbia, or had gone to school at Columbia. And I never would have thought they would have been learning Spanish at that point. Mm-hmm. But you have Spanish and French teachers. And all of these women that are teaching at the Margaret Booth School, here's Mount Holyoke College. I should underline these, sorry. But you just have this very high caliber women who have studied at some of the top schools in the nation, not just for women, but in general. And then Sarah Hart graduates Margaret Booth School, goes to Goucher, and then comes back and teaches at Margaret Booth before taking a permanent job at Goucher. Mm-hmm. And so the question that I have, if you think Zelda's crammed in this elementary school, maybe not academically as rigorous or engaging, then goes to Sydney Lanier, I just wonder, had she been properly engaged or had she gone to a school like this, would she have gone to college? Almost all these women from Margaret Booth go on to college.
I've always wondered about that, only because I'm not sure. Maybe you can let me know. Did any of the girls, the Sayre girls, go on to college?
I don't. If Marjorie became a teacher, would she have?
Yeah. See, we don't. There's some gaps.
There's a gap. I think
in
then,
knowledge.
but also they graduate 10, 15 years before Zelda.
Because again, if you are to take Save Me the Walls as highly autobiographical, I personally do. I'm sure there are others who don't. It does seem that Judge Sayre wanted his daughters to marry. That it's not that he wanted them ill-educated, it's just that he felt that was the primary reason.
I get the sense that it's quite the opposite, because there is the newspaper article where Minnie is describing her children, and I guess Zelda was young, so she's not discussed, but she describes how her daughters are all working. I think the Sayre girls were all unusual in that they worked and didn't have to. And Rosalind was the society reporter here, then has the Post in Birmingham. Mm-hmm. My understanding is that when she couldn't become a reporter, like a full reporter, that's when she came back to Montgomery and worked at the bank. And we know she's the first woman to work at a bank. I don't
think that Minnie Machen Sayre had that attitude. I'm just focusing on Judge Sayre. He had a big financial interest in having his daughters marry.
Yeah, but I don't think financially they were very comfortable.
Yeah, but there was a lot of people living in the house.
Well, in the early years, but by the time, because Marjorie marries, Tilly marries, Rosalind married, but they all married in their latter 20s. And then when Newman Smith, Rosalind's husband, serving in World War I, Rosalind moves back into the house. So I don't think in the early years, before they moved to Pleasant Avenue, they were somewhere in Capitol Heights. I forget the street name, but that's when he had his brother was living with them. Minnie's sister was living with them. There was an aunt and a mother-in-law. And so I think at one point they had like 10 people in the house.
It's a big house over on Pleasant Avenue.
So, I think this was before Pleasant Avenue.
Yeah, you might be right.
And then Reed Sayre moves out.
Street.
I think Minnie's sister goes back to Kentucky. And so when they get to Pleasant Avenue, they have more money and there's less people.
Anyway, I took us off point for a second there.
But that's my question is maybe we'll find out more when she gets to high school, because we have a little bit more information on that. But just looking at what all is happening at Margaret Booth School, the level of the teachers there. Yeah. You would want these credentials. You couldn't get these credentials for a high school teacher today.
Many of the students at Margaret Booth went on to all the great female colleges in the Northeast. Schools like Bennington, Vassar.
Yeah. Here was it said Miss Gladys Winter passed all of her examinations with such a success as to be admitted to Vassar this fall as an honor. These are the students. Miss Anna Louise Greel made such acceptable records that she will be admitted to Wellesley. Mm-hmm. And then it keeps going.
That's how good the reputation of the school was.
Yes. So and then it says the history department so successfully conducted last year by Miss Sarah Hart will be continued under the same. Ms. Hart is a graduate of both Margaret Booth School and Goucher College, and she graduated with honors. And it just goes on. You just read on the next as she goes to Mount Holyoke.
So you think that if Zelda had gone to the school with its limited amount of children or young girls in the school, she may have gone on to college, or at least may have become more scholastic.
More of a scholar. Because I'm fairly sure that Tallulah. I think Tallulah went to Gussie Woodruff School. I don't think that she went to
I've read that
Margaret
name,
Booth.
but I don't know who Gussie. I love the name.
I know,
Gussie
this is
Booth.
great.
Do you know anything about her?
Yeah, we'll look her up.
Okay.
It was kind of the rival of the Margaret Booth School, and so you do have, and I think in Montgomery still today, you have the public schools, and then you kind of have a hierarchy of private schools, and it seems to have been the case then. You just see if Zelda had been more challenged, more engaged, maybe have been more amongst her, I don't know, intellectual peer, because she remains friends with Sarah Mayfield, and as she,
Yeah, I would imagine Lucy Goldthwait probably went to Margaret Booth. That was one of her close friends.
Yeah. And instead, we know that her siblings were very good students. However, she did not seem that interested. And even her senior years, she was out partying.
Yeah.
But she would come, and you get the sense that she had the intelligence to kind of coast.
That's what I totally agree with that. I mean, we know that she's reading every single book that comes across the front door of her house.
Yeah.
We know she's very literate. I think that she's just so individual. Maybe it's hard for her to sit down in a classroom and listen to somebody telling her.
And I also wonder, as we kind of inch toward her meeting Scott, was the attraction. Biographers will say, he'd gone to Princeton, that he was clearly charming. There was something urbane though. Mm-hmm. And maybe that, I don't know, was maybe missing. Maybe that was part of the attraction.
He was very charmed by her mind as well. Yeah. She had a very unique take on things. She always does.
Yeah. What else do we have about the Sayre Street School? The one thing that I also found interesting in this, in 1914, so this is about when in 14, she may have been 8th grade. We're not quite sure.
See here when she goes.
So I think this is her final year at Sayre Street, because I think it would have been 1st through 8th, and then you had gone to high school.
Yeah, she enters City Lanier at 1914.
Okay. So there is this article, and it made me laugh. It says, moving pictures in schoolroom indispensable. It says, eye grasps facts more quickly than retains them. Eye grasps facts more quickly and retains them longer than the ear. And I'll post this because it says within the next decade, the moving pictures will be the indispensable adjunct of every teacher and educational lecturer. On the public platform, the cinematograph, they don't even have a movie yet, will inevitably have its recognized place, and it may even invade the pulpit. I mean, this is 1914. It took a little longer than this man anticipated, but you think he really saw the future. As the attention and interest of educators are more and more drawn to its merits, the future usefulness of the educational, I don't know how to say it, cinematograph. It's cinema with a T-O graph. Bids fair to surpass the predictions of its most sanguine advocates. And then he goes on and says, in preparing scientific films for general use, the greatest difficulty is make them in such a way that they can be easily understood. Because in the films of history and classical literature, there is another and graver danger, that of misrepresenting facts. There have been many such films made which are useless for educational purposes for that reason alone. Many a director has sacrificed truth because he thought the story would be more dramatic, or because in some way it suited his purpose better if changed.
Some things never change.
No. So he goes on and he's talking about how they are able to do. It says, among the most interesting and most wonderful are the microscopical. It's like, we say microscopic now, but you just see the language. It's so new. That the microscopical pictures taken with cameras fitted with microscopical attachments. And he goes on to talk about amoebas and circulation of frogs' legs or something. He says, the time is rapidly approaching when every university will be fully equipped with cameras, perforators, printers, and all the appliances necessary to make their own negative and positive film. So he's talking about film production. Mm-hmm. I was like, what is a perforator? But it's, the film on the side. Yes. It says several kinds of small cameras suitable for this work are already procurable, and if it is desired to go into more elaborate work, many good makes of professional cameras are at the disposal of the experimenter. Many institutions of learning have photographers and slide makers who could easily learn to operate a motion picture camera. So it's interesting that in 1914, here in Montgomery, they're advocating for the use of, I guess, documentary film, or that the film industry be used that way.
The kind of documentaries we were forced to watch in science class in 8th grade.
Yes.
You know, the films that, destroyed our interest in science.
Yeah, those, and I don't know if they still show them, but did you have, we had to take the driving class, and they show you all those, it was like
the accident movies?
Yes, the accident, you're like.
Yeah. In hygiene class.
Yes, and they were always in black. They were like the ones that we saw, this is the late 80s, early 90s. They were, I swear, from the 50s and 60s. They were black and white, gruesome film footage. Yes. And you're like, what? Yeah. It's like no one wanted to drive. So, and it's just interesting that they, I think, again, in the early 1900s to 1920, it's very parallel to where we live in, that technology, you have this rapid increase of technology and how to use it, how to attain it. I think one thing that I didn't realize, but Fitzgerald's one of the first writers to really use the car. Gatsby, and Cruise of the Rolling Junk, that is, he's one of the first to really highlight, not, directly, but
the Car Society.
Well, and just one of the first to write about new technologies. Yeah. So do we have any?
They had a lot of cars in their lifetime. Yeah. I think they were all secondhand. I don't know that they ever bought a first-hand automobile.
No, but they were always moving, and I think in one of his final letters, he sold the car, and he had sent her a book. We know from the letters, and that he had another job, so he was going to buy a different car. Mm-hmm. But I wonder I want to know what kind of drivers they were. They didn't.
Well, we do know that Sheila Graham complained that when she drove her car with Fitzgerald in it, if she went over 20 miles an hour, he would just, grab a hold of the sides of the car. He just could not bear for her to go faster than 20 miles an hour. We do know also.
Well, that would have been in L.A.
Yeah.
So if you think L.A. and the cars, he was there, he dies in 40. Yeah. So we're talking like Model T, Model A, a model, these are not.
And this would have been 40, I don't know. I think there would have been slightly more modern. Who knows what Sheila Graham was driving?
Well, she's probably driving a car from the mid-late 30s, which you think a Model A, Model T, it's not like what we have today.
No, but I don't think it would have been a Model T.
I'm just saying.
Have to get
because I've been watching on HBO, the Perry Mason show, and it's set in LA in the 30s, and you look at those cars and you see them driving, and you're like, well, Fitzgerald, he was there from 36 to 40. Yeah. And you think, they're beautiful, but they're not great cars. And, a lot of them open, the windows, there's no windows.
Yeah, we had that when I was a kid.
So I was just watching it. I was just having a glimpse of what it might have been like when Fitzgerald was in L.A. in the 30s.
We have one photograph of the Fitzgerald family sitting in a car in France, and Scotty's nurse is in the back seat, and all three of them are in the front. Now, I believe this is the car that in A Movable Feast, Fitzgerald travels with Hemingway to the south of France to pick it up. Zelda had gotten into a bit of an auto wreck, and she had insisted that the top of the car be removed. And so they had it torn off.
Yeah.
And, of course, that leads into all kinds of, nonsense in the book, Save Me the Waltz. But I think that car, there is a photograph of that car in several biographies of the Fitzgeralds.
Because a lot
of those,
a
tin can, to be honest.
Yeah, they do. But you think of that time period, a lot of them, I know Model A's. My granddad has a 31. and they have that, it's a retractable top, so you could see how you could just easily just take that off. And some of them did have hard tops, some didn't. We'll find out. We'll do a whole thing on their cars. So
we only have Hemingway to go on. As we know, he's an unreliable narrator.
Yeah. The other thing I missed was there was an ad for the neighborhood in 1913, and it's A.L. and L.W. Tyson Real Estate, Insurance, and Bonds. L.W. Tyson is Helen Keller's brother-in-law. Her sister was Mildred, and the Tyson home, the Tyson Moore home, is just 2 doors down from us here at the museum.
And a beautiful house it is.
Yes. We have a lot of great women. We had Helen Keller here in the neighborhood, Zelda, and Harper Lee.
Incredible. She went to Huntington.
She went to Huntington. She and her sister Alice. Alice graduated, and then, of course, Harper Lee transferred to University of Alabama, but she was here for a year. But it describes their selling property, and it describes the neighborhood. It is close to the business district, a block from Sayre Street School, and within 200 yards of 3 branches of the street railway. So you think for where Zelda, she's growing up in what's the Cottage Hill neighborhood. It's just a block or so away from her home, and that there are 3 tram lines or trolley lines just a block away. You think about how kind of fun a neighborhood or how convenient a neighborhood this would have been for children, particularly growing up. Sarah Mayfield was saying their nurses would take them to play on the playground at the school. We know that she's commandeering various tram lines, but it would have been a very easy ride down to the Capitol, and everything would have been on Dexter Avenue.
And I would say that even today, it is a wonderful neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's in the process of being gentrified to a certain degree. Tougher times, apparently, in the past, so that we've lost things like Zelda's home. Mm-hmm. But it's very beautiful. I would encourage anybody who comes to Montgomery to take a trip to Cottage Hill.
Yeah, it's where the Equal Justice Memorial is now. And when you do go on, I think the western, it's basically, they cleared out a lot of it, and it's a really beautiful, but it's almost like a park. But on the western boundary edge on Goldthwaite Street, his Winter Place is still there. What was Zelda's home church, Church of the Holy Comforter, it's now a music venue. In her lifetime, it was the Montgomery Little Theater because the church moved to a bigger building. Pleasant Avenue is on the south side. It abuts Mildred, and then, of course, the Sayre Street School is still there.
And as you go further west on Cottage Hill, it gets more upscale. There are a lot of Victorian
they've been
cottages
renovated.
that have been renovated and brought back.
Yeah.
They still sell for, compared to northeastern real estate. I mean, they're a bargain.
Yeah.
And they're
so
gorgeous.
if you want to come to Montgomery, have a nice painted lady fixer-upper.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's we kind of conclude our Sayre Street. Any other questions about her and her child? I really wish we knew what curriculum that they had.
Maybe if we can look a little further at newspapers.com.
Yeah, I went through some. I wasn't able to find the curriculum, but I'm still really intrigued by these vendors.
Maybe somebody at Sidney Lanier High School, which is now the Baldwin,
Baldwin.
Magnet School.
We'll be covering that. Well, just as a tease, the research I was doing on the Sidney Lanier, which is now Baldwin Magnet, Arts Magnet, that they had a very a highly technical program. They had early X-ray. They were teaching how to be a radiologist in the basement. What's going on?
Shades of Marie Curie.
You're like, wow, you can learn to be a radiologist in the basement. And the other thing that fascinates me about that building, so you and I both have been since the beginning of lockdown and just at the and since, is that the gymnasium's inside on the top floor. Yeah. The original gym, you're like, why would you put a gym?
It is strange. We always think of them in the basement.
Or outside adjoining, but it's an indoor gymnasium, and it's on the top floor, and it's now Zelda dance studio.
Yeah, it's the Zelda Fitzgerald dance
studio. Yeah. So we'll cover it. Maybe we can interview the principal. She's quite lovely as well. But if you have any questions, please feel free to email us. You can go to thefitzgeraldmuseum.org and use our contact page, or join our Facebook group, and we're also on Instagram. So if you have any questions, and we will also have all these images and some of the newspaper articles on the show notes. So again, just go to thefitzgeraldmuseum.org and then click on podcast show pages, and it'll take you there.
And if you know anything about the Sayre Street curriculum from 1906, please be in touch
or
with us.
if you're listening, we've had a couple of people. My grandmother went to Sayre Street and then to Baldwin as a junior high.
Right?
Yes, and then to what may or may not still be Sidney Lanier High School.
Yeah.
We know Hank Williams also went to. He went to when it was a Baldwin. I don't think Zelda, that building was Sidney Lanier. Then it was renamed Baldwin, made junior high school. We now say middle. And the new Sidney Lanier was built. So my grandmother went to Sayre, Baldwin, and then Sidney Lanier.
The 1929 on Court Street.
Yes. Yeah. And
beautiful school.
So she went both to those schools. And then Hank Williams went to Baldwin as a junior high. And I think then went to Sidney Lanier.
Okay.
So we have a lot of history here in Montgomery. But we'll wrap it up. We hope you're all well. If you are traveling, we do, again, still have our Airbnbs, which are a very safe alternative. We have a lot of people. We just had people stay who were here to check on elderly parents. They stay and cook. And when things get a little better, come and visit us.
Yeah.
See you next time. Bye.
Thank you.